The depths of terror. The sunset transformed the ocean into a vast canvas of blazing gold, but within minutes, it gave way to a deep crimson darkness. The coastal town of Grey Haven, wedged between rocky cliffs and the endless ocean, seemed like something torn from the past. Old houses lined narrow streets, and waves constantly crashed against the rocks as if hiding something beneath their depths. The residents spoke little, their eyes ever watchful. They knew more than they let on, but they were the kind who kept silent to avoid awakening the darkness. Kate Harper had arrived in Grey Haven to work as a journalist. She didn't believe the old tales about the Phantom of the Reefs, a murderous mermaid said to dwell in the nearby depths. According to legend, every few years, she would return, luring her victims into the water with whispers or song before dragging them to the depths. Kate dismissed it as a mere tourist scare tactic meant to boost the town's economy. But everything changed when people began to disappear. First, a fisherman named Jacob vanished, his body found on the shore. His eyes were wide open, his face frozen in terror. A few days later, a young couple camping near the cliffs disappeared. Their campsite was found in disarray, with scattered belongings and barefoot tracks leading to the water. Sheriff Blake, accustomed to dealing with petty thefts and bar brawls, now faced something beyond comprehension. Kate grew intrigued by the disappearances. She interviewed the locals, recording their stories, though most refused to talk about the mermaid. Only one woman, old Mabel, who lived on the outskirts of town, was willing to share. Her voice trembled as she recounted her childhood, the night her father was taken by the one who sings. Mabel swore she had seen him walk into the water, as if spellbound, before a pale hand emerged from the surface, grabbing his ankle. That same night, Kate decided to investigate the cliffs by the shore. Armed only with a flashlight and a recorder, she navigated the narrow paths until she stood above the water. A thick fog enveloped the coast, and her flashlight's beam cut through it like a blade. Then she heard it, the song. Deep, tender, and yet sinister, the voice flowed from the darkness, quickening her heartbeat. Kate descended closer to the water. The song grew clearer, and she thought she could make out a feminine silhouette among the waves. A mermaid. Her long hair shimmered in the moonlight, her eyes glowing with an icy blue flame. But the most terrifying thing was the way she moved, unnaturally graceful, her motions predatory, like a hunter ready to strike. The mermaid spoke, but Kate couldn't understand the words. The voice invaded her mind, filling her thoughts. Suddenly, she felt her legs carrying her toward the water. At the last moment, something snapped in her consciousness. She turned on her recorder to capture the sound, which helped her break free of the trance. The next day, Kate listened to the recording, but the device played only a deep hum, like a whisper. She realized the mermaid was real, her voice a weapon capable of bending human will. Kate returned to the cliffs with Sheriff Blake, this time prepared. They brought a loudspeaker to drown out the singing and special flashlights. The mermaid was waiting. Her eyes burned with hatred, her mouth curling into a predatory smile that revealed rows of sharp teeth. She leaped from the water, shadow-like, but the beams of their flashlights blinded her. Kate and the sheriff managed to drive the mermaid away, but they couldn't destroy her. She dove back into the water, vanishing among the waves, though her song lingered in the night. Kate realized this was only a temporary victory. The mermaid would wait for her next opportunity to return. Grey Haven remained as gloomy as ever, but now Kate knew the legends held a kernel of truth. She decided to stay in the town to uncover more, perhaps to one day stop the Phantom of the Reefs for good. Yet even in her thoughts, she wasn't sure if such a feat was possible. After Kate decided to stay in Grey Haven, her nights were no longer peaceful. Every time the wind rose from the sea, she heard a distant song, as if from a faraway abyss. This sound filled her dreams, pulling her back to the moment when she stood before the mermaid at the edge of the cliff. Her face, elegant yet eerie, blazing with hatred, haunted her even when she tried to sleep. One evening, while going through the local archives, Kate came across old documents that explained the origin of the Phantom of the Reefs. The legend told of a young woman named Lillian, who had lived in Grey Haven centuries ago. She was the daughter of a fisherman, known for her beauty and a voice that captivated all who heard it. Lillian fell in love with a sailor, but he betrayed her, setting sail with another woman. In despair, Lillian threw herself into the ocean from the cliffs during a full moon, and her body was never found. It is said that the sea claimed her, but instead of granting her peace, it transformed her into a creature filled with hatred and terror. Kate realized that this story might be the key to defeating the mermaid. She decided to find out if there was a way to stop the creature by returning it to a state of peace. Together with Sheriff Blake and a few brave souls from the town, she developed a plan. That next night, they set out for the cliffs during the full moon. They brought with them an old sea bell, found in the museum, and a group of singers from the local church choir. Mabel, who was assisting them, believed that the bell and the harmony of human song could neutralize the mermaid's power. When the moon rose above the horizon, the mermaid appeared once more. Her figure emerged from the water, her eyes burning with blue fire. She began to sing, attempting to enchant them. Her voice infiltrated their minds, making them feel cold and fear. But Kate and her group responded with the sound of the bell and song. Their voices interrupted the mermaid's sinister melody, creating a barrier between her and her would-be victims. The mermaid struggled, but her song grew weaker. She glanced at Kate, and in her eyes flashed something akin to despair. She suddenly stopped singing and, like a ghost, vanished into the waves. Kate stood at the edge of the cliff, looking into the dark water. She thought she heard one more echo of the song, but this time it was quiet and melancholic, like the cry of a soul searching for peace. The mermaid never reappeared, but Kate knew that her story was not over. The spirit of Lillian seemed to have found temporary peace, but the ocean kept its secrets. Grey Haven remained as grim as ever, and its inhabitants continued to live between land and sea, always remembering that the depths might hide something more than just fish. Kate decided to write an article, but she felt it would be only the beginning. The mermaid was more than just a legend or a monster. She was part of the sea itself, its dark and beautiful nature. And Kate knew, if people began to forget her story again, Lillian might return to remind them of how dangerous beauty can be when it hides a depth of terror. Kate couldn't shake the feeling that Lillian's story was just the tip of the iceberg. After the night on the cliffs, something had changed within her. She would wake up in the middle of the night from dreams in which she found herself underwater, seeing strange things there, abandoned cities, bizarre creatures, and sometimes, Lillian herself, standing in silence and staring directly at her. The mermaid never spoke, but her eyes were filled with an endless sorrow. One morning, Kate noticed that her notes had vanished. The recorder, the notebook, everything she had collected about the mermaid, was gone from her room, as if someone had deliberately erased the evidence. She suspected that someone local had decided to get rid of it, but she felt that this was something more. Her apartment felt damp, and beneath the window, she found a seashell that hadn't been there before. When Kate went to Mabel to ask if she had seen anything unusual, the old woman sat silently, staring at a single point. Her hand was clenched, holding an old photograph. Kate took a closer look. It was a picture of a group of fishermen, and among them she recognized a young man. "That's my father," Mabel whispered, then added almost inaudibly, "She came back for him." This struck Kate as odd. The mermaid dragged the living into the water, but why was she now haunting the past? She asked Mabel if her father had any connection to Lillian in life. The old woman replied that there had been rumors that he was one of those who had abandoned her when she lost everything. This made Kate wonder, maybe Lillian's revenge wasn't random. Her victims might be connected to her past. That same evening, Kate returned to the cliffs. She knew it was dangerous, but she felt that she had to uncover the truth. The night was pitch black, and the sea was restless. She stood at the edge, staring into the water, when suddenly she felt something or someone whisper her name. It was the same voice, but this time it was soft, almost tender. The mermaid emerged from the water so unexpectedly that Kate nearly stumbled. Lillian was even more terrifying than before. Her eyes glowed, and her body shimmered like water under the moonlight. But this time she did not attack. She only stared at Kate and seemed to be waiting. Kate felt an odd urge to speak. She asked, "Why are you doing this? Why can't you find peace?" The mermaid tilted her head, her lips slowly curling into a ghostly smile, and she answered in a quiet voice that felt both distant and near, "Because there is no peace. He took it from me, and now the sea takes it from all." This admission struck Kate deeply. Lillian was not just a monster. She was a victim who had become a predator. Her hatred was fueled by her wrongs, and the sea that had claimed her only deepened her pain. Kate understood. Unless Lillian found what she was searching for, her curse would continue. Kate decided to dig deeper. She began investigating the past, searching for descendants of those who had lived in Grey Haven during Lillian's time. Her search led her to an old house on the edge of town, where the McKinley family lived. They had kept old diaries that confirmed that their great-grandfather was the sailor who had betrayed Lillian. Together with the McKinley family, Kate set out for the cliffs during the next full moon. They brought with them an old amulet that once belonged to Lillian, and a letter in which her betrayer asked for forgiveness, written just before his death but never delivered. When Lillian appeared again, Kate read the letter aloud. The mermaid froze, her eyes clouding over, and her singing ceased. For a moment, everything was still, and then Lillian slowly reached for the amulet. She held it in her hands, and tears, like sea water, flowed down her face. With a mournful cry, Lillian dove into the ocean, and the water swirled, creating a whirlpool that pulled her down to the depths. When everything was quiet, the sea was calm, and the song no longer echoed. Grey Haven sighed in relief. Kate knew that Lillian had found her peace, but she also knew that the sea never fully gives back what it has taken. After Lillian's disappearance, life in Grey Haven gradually began to return to its usual rhythm. The fishermen no longer found strange traces on the shore, and the singing that once echoed through the nights became just a memory, dissolved in the sound of the waves. The town started to come alive again, tourists returned, and the locals once more bravely ventured out to sea. However, Kate felt that the story was not yet finished. A few weeks after that night when Lillian vanished, Kate began to notice strange things. Seashells continued to appear by her door, sometimes carrying a faint echo of singing, almost inaudible but still unsettling. One day, while walking along the shore, she saw footprints in the sand leading straight into the water, only to vanish suddenly. Kate returned to the archives and began studying other legends related to the sea and Grey Haven. She discovered that Lillian's story was just a part of a larger myth about the Daughters of the Depths, ancient beings that appeared on shores and lived among people until they were betrayed. According to legend, these creatures returned to the ocean when their pain became too great, but their hatred turned them into predators. Kate started noticing that the locals avoided talking about other missing people. She stumbled upon stories of mysterious disappearances that had occurred even before Lillian's. She felt that her investigation had only scratched the surface of something much larger. One evening, when the moon once again shone over the water, Kate went to the shore to think. She sat on a rock and listened to the waves crashing against the shore. There was something strange in the air. The silence felt heavy, as if the sea was waiting. And then she saw her. The mermaid. But it wasn't Lillian. This creature was different. Her hair was as black as night, and her eyes were golden, like the rising sun. She stood in the water, half hidden by the waves, and stared at Kate. Her presence was less hostile, but no less ominous. "Lillian has found peace," the mermaid said. Her voice was quiet, but Kate heard it so clearly, as if it were echoing inside her head. "But her pain is only part of what we have endured. You think you have finished this story, but the sea never forgets. We always return." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She asked, "What do you want from us? Why do you return?" "We come to remind you of what you fear," the creature replied, and her golden eyes gleamed. "The sea takes when it is harmed. You have taken life from it, and now it takes yours." Then she disappeared, dissolving into the waves just as unexpectedly as she had appeared. Kate sat still, her thoughts swirling like a storm. The next morning, she decided to continue her investigation. She became convinced that Grey Haven hid even more secrets than she had imagined. But now she understood that the battle with the sea was not only a battle with its creatures. It was a struggle to preserve the balance between people and the ocean. Kate decided to stay. She knew the sea would challenge Grey Haven again, but now she was ready. Her mission was no longer just journalistic. She had become a guardian of stories, those that could warn others, and those that made people remember. The sea never forgives, and its depths always hide more than they seem at first glance. Months passed, and Grey Haven was once again enveloped in silence. But it was not a silence of peace, but of anxiety. The townspeople avoided the sea, as if sensing that its depths hid something unknown. Kate remained in the town, constantly trying to learn more about the mysterious legend of the Daughters of the Depths. Her research led her to forgotten stories, intertwining with tragedies that had occurred for centuries. One evening, when the town was asleep, Kate was awoken by a loud knock at the door. Standing on the doorstep was Mabel, frightened and pale, holding an old amulet with a deep blue stone. "It was on my doorstep," she said, shaking her head. "It's a sign. They are returning." Kate took the amulet and noticed it was wet and covered with salty foam. She realized this was no coincidence. The mermaids or something else from the sea wanted to warn them, or perhaps frighten them. The next day, the sea was restless. Waves crashed violently against the rocks, and the sky was covered in dark clouds, although no rain fell. Kate, feeling that this might be her last chance to understand what was happening, gathered a few locals, Mabel, Sheriff Blake, and a few brave souls. They headed to the coast, bringing the amulet and an old book of legends that Kate had found in the library. On the shore, they heard the singing, the same eerie sound, but this time it came not from a distance, but from all sides. The waves parted, and figures began to rise from the depths. Mermaids, not one, but several, emerged from the water. Their faces were different, some full of rage, others of sorrow, but all radiated a power that seemed otherworldly. Kate stepped forward, holding the amulet. "We don't want any more conflict," she said, trying to hide the fear in her voice. "What do you want? Why are you returning?" One of the mermaids, the tallest and most terrifying of all, stepped forward. Her voice was low and deep, like the rumble of waves. "We are returning because you have forgotten. You have forgotten the pain, the sacrifices, and that the sea is life, not your bounty. You betrayed us, and now the sea betrays you." Kate understood that this was not just revenge. It was a warning. She turned to the locals standing behind her. "We have to change. We must acknowledge our mistakes and find a way to live in harmony with the sea." She turned back to the mermaids and extended the amulet. "This is a symbol of our apology. We are ready to change if you give us a chance." The mermaids looked at her, and then one of them, with golden eyes, extended her hand and accepted the amulet. She nodded, and the singing began to fade, while the water around them calmed. "This is your last chance," the mermaid said. "The sea forgives, but it does not forget. We will be watching." And with those words, they disappeared into the waves, leaving Kate and the people of Grey Haven standing on the shore in silence. After this event, Grey Haven changed. The townspeople began to treat the sea with more respect. They created a reserve, restricted fishing, and began sharing the legends of the Daughters of the Depths, so that no one would forget that the sea is not only a source of life, but also a mighty force that can take. Kate wrote an article that became famous across the country, but she decided to stay in Grey Haven. She realized that her mission was not just to tell stories, but to be part of the change. The sea remained calm, but every time Kate walked along the shore, she felt that someone was watching her from the depths. And she knew, they were still here, they remember. But as long as Grey Haven remembers too, balance would be maintained.